Ray, it is truly my honor to be welcoming you into conversation here for Wharton People Analytics. I'm going to dig right in with what I think you're best known for. And I think this is what we should talk about today, which is how we can use feedback, how we can get real feedback in real time from other people. I want to start with how you came to this. I think it's epiphany, realization, life philosophy. Would you share a little bit about radical transparency and where you came upon it?
In 1982, I made, like a terrible mistake in the markets, crashed, very, very painful mistake. And I reflected on it. And then I started to realize that the success that I could have came from going beyond what I had in my head and what I personally knew. And that I worried about being wrong, and I wanted to continue to be audacious and go for my goals, but I wanted others to stress test me and to be challenged. So I didn't care about where being right came from. I just wanted to be right and make the best decisions. And so that painful mistake had a big effect on me. So anyway, what I really learned about was, let's say, pain plus reflection equals progress.
So if radical transparency is almost a surefire way to learn from pain, to continue to develop, no matter how well you already do something, then why is it, I think, relatively uncommon to embrace a kind of I want to know what everyone else truly thinks about me?
So we think about disagreement, what disagreement could be, right? If two people are disagreeing, somebody's probably wrong. And how do you know that person isn't you? How do you know you're not the wrong one? So logically, you would have curiosity. That would be the thing. Why is it, and how do we resolve it so I make sure I'm right? But yet you have this experience instead where it's like an attack. However, all of this can be changed. I found that we have our culture, and we have a culture like this. And if people realize that that's really good for them, that self-understanding, the understanding of others and how it works together and getting at the right answer, that kind of thing, and they start to realize that that is what makes them successful. That experience in 1982, which gave me, the fear and humility I needed while still going forward to my audacious goals, was something that I realized others could have. And if they start to realize from that point on, we were successful. From that point on, because of how we dealt with it, because it wasn't all in our heads, because we would deal with what was truthful and we would deal with our realities well, and by interacting well. And then we would have the meaningful, work and meaningful relationships thing is very, very powerful. And then also, if you have truthfulness, radical truthfulness and radical transparency, then you can find out what's true, because if you're not truthful, you won't get at what's true. So that's not practical. And then also you build trust.
I was going to ask you about that. Some people listening to you might think wow, I think if everybody really tells each other what they think, and, some part of the time, those are negative or critical thoughts, it's going to undermine trust. My sense is that at Bridgewater and in your experience, it does exactly the opposite, that when you have.
Right. Because we know, right? We know if somebody's being radically truthful with us, right? Particularly if it's framed well, so that you explain to people, look, this is just how I'm seeing it, and I might be wrong. And we should discuss it, and we should explore it. How do we get at what's true? Because if we can get at what's true, that's fundamental to making progress. And if we all have these hidden agendas and these things in our head, that's going to stand in the way of progress.
So let's talk about opinion versus data. It might seem like the obvious solution to not having the whole picture, wanting to know what everybody else thinks as you make your way through the jungle to their side. It might seem like, I'll just ask a couple of people for their opinion. Tell me what you think about opinion versus data.
Well, opinions are conclusions. I find that so many people start with conclusions. I mean, like, who cares? I don't care about anybody's opinion. I care about how they got to their opinion, right? So, and then different people have different opinions. So we have to realize, like you've seen in personality profile tests and so on, or just in any contact, that if you ask somebody to describe what's happening, and you know, it's like the 7 blind men and the elephant. They're all going to describe what's happening in their own particular way, because that's the reality.
That's their own perspective. That's they can't get out of.
Right? So not all opinions are equally good. Like some people may, on some subjects, not have earned the right to have an opinion. You know, if you're going to pick a doctor and you're going to say, okay, I want 3 doctors who are smart. They're, you know, in other words, I have reasons to believe that. I want to hear their reasoning, and I want them to disagree with each other, because it's in that disagreement that I can find the best answer. Then at the end of the day, you say, what are you going to do? But it's not because we're going to start with random people and having that. And data has objectivity. When you start to bring in the data and you together say, let's look at the data. Let's look at the evidence. So let's say you and I have a different opinion on something. Okay, that's fine. And then
on an investment, for example.
Angela, or let's say on people. Our common.
I would rather be disagreeing with you on people than an investment.
But that's right? So that's right. And I listen to you because I would say, wow, you've got a lot of experience. And then it is in the joy of the back and forth. And if we can check it off and we could sort of say, we agree. Now, so we would say, when we're looking at data, how could we find out? How could we be scientific?
Like, how do we have a testable hypothesis, right? Like, not just sort of a foregone conclusion, which is in some ways untestable, but like, what are the assumptions or the data that lead us to a certain opinion or conclusion? So it sounds like data is not just the plural of opinion.
It is part of the process that leads one to opinion.
Right. It's the input. Okay, so let's actually turn to personality assessments. Now, I recently learned that you have created with Adam Grant and others a new personality assessment. I'd love you to tell me more about that.
Well, about 25 years ago, I started to see that, like, so many people see things differently. And then I learned, okay, there's this test called Myers-Briggs. And I gave it to 150 of top managers in my company, and so they took it, and then I read its output, person by person, and in many cases I said, "Wow, I didn't believe anybody thought that way." Let's say the big picture thinker and the detail thinker. The big picture thinker says, "Oh, and we could do this," and they're thinking abstractly of the future and so on. The detail thinker, who is more in the now and here in the practicalities, would say to your head's in the clouds. You know, will you get grounded? And the big picture thinker says, you are tripping up on all these details and so on. Don't you see the big picture? And the truth is, they need each other. So all of these different types of thinking have a purpose, right? But they are different types of thinking.
You were telling me about, like, you know, these other personality assessments that you were then exploring after the Myers-Briggs, because I do want to know why you didn't just use one of the off-the-shelf personality assessments and what you've designed with PrinciplesYou.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Because what I couldn't get all that I needed in one. I mean, I think, you know, there are just so many dimensions of a person to a person. And then they would all give little dimensions, pictures. And I wanted the whole better picture. And I wanted to bring it all together. And I wanted also the things that I wanted to look for. And I could do this, you know, so why not bring the best of the best together and, you know, have fun and build that thing together. And we did. And so we've done all the beta testing, you know, and lots of people have taken it, and it's great. And you took it, so we'll maybe chat about that. But we've taken surveys, and they say it's the best description of them. So if most accurate in relationship to the other ones. And then we also made it that it would show relationships between people. So in other words, if one person takes it and another person takes it, they might say, okay, here's my partner or friend or whatever, and they would put it together, and it will give them insights on their relationships. And then we're building it out so that it can be used in companies for forming teams. What does your team look like? What is your team's bias? What might you be missing? And all of that. So it's been great.
So what is I did take it, by the way, and one of my, I guess, top traits was orchestrator, which I thought to be true. I wonder, what were the characteristics that you maybe thought were absent in most inventories that you included in PrinciplesYou?
I wanted to find, as I found a replacement for me at Bridgewater, I wanted to find a certain type of person, a shaper. So I wanted to find somebody who could go from visualization to actualization. And so then I gave the tests to people who were shapers I knew. I gave it to Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Reed Hastings, a lot of people, but also not just in the business world. I gave it to Muhammad Yunus, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for microfinance and social. I gave it to Jeffrey Canada, Heartland's Children's Home. But people who made this big, they could go from visualization to actualization, because I wanted to get the type of person. I wanted to find out there were different types of persons or personalities for different types of roles and so on, to fit them kind of into the role, not just to describe what it was. And so, that was a big dimension. And it was great because I could get a prototype. I found that that these shapers had an enormous amount in common. I mean, basically a common approach.
What is a shaper? Like, shaper's not
a shaper. Yeah. What I meant is somebody who has an idea of visualization. Elon Musk says,
we're going to go to space.
We can go to the moon. We got to go to another planet or something, or a different visualization, and actually builds it out.
And you decided to make this personality assessment, unlike, I believe, all of the ones that you mentioned, you decided to make it free and public. And I was surprised by that, because I thought this was an internal Bridgewater proprietary competitive advantage.
I'm at a stage in my life. What's my purpose of my life now? I'm 71 years old. The purpose of my life now is to pass along the things that were good, help me, that others can use. Because I'm not going to be around, a limited amount of time. On my journey, I learned a lot, and I want to pass it along. People can take it or leave it, but I wanted to make it free for everyone. So it's going to be free for everyone. So
this is, as Erik Erikson would say, the generative stage of life, which is to pass along the wisdom that you've had to others. There's something else that you created out of, from scratch, right? You weren't taking another product, the dot collector. And I think that's different, but related. Can you tell us what the dot collector is?
Better than me tell you about it, let me show you the dot collector. A week after the U.S. election, our research team held a meeting to discuss what a Trump presidency would mean for the U.S. economy. Naturally, people had different opinions on the matter and how we were approaching the discussion. The dot collector collects these views. It has a list of a few dozen attributes, and so whenever someone thinks something about another person's thinking, it's easy for them to convey that assessment. They simply note the attribute and provide a rating from 1 to 10. For example, as the meeting began, a researcher named Jen rated me a 3, in other words, badly, for not showing a good balance of assertiveness and open-mindedness. As the meeting transpired, Jen's assessments of people added up like this. Others in the room had very different opinions. That's normal. Different people are always going to have different opinions. And who knows who's right? Let's just look at what people thought about how I was doing. Some people thought I did well, others poorly. With each of these views, we can explore the thinking behind the numbers. Here's what Jen and Larry said. Note that everyone gets to express their thinking, including their critical thinking, regardless of their position in the company. Jen, who's 24 years old and fresh out of college, can tell me, the CEO of the company, that I'm approaching things terribly. This tool helps people both express their opinions and separate themselves from their opinions to see things from a higher level. When Jen and others shift their attentions from inputting their opinions to looking down on the whole screen, their perspective changes. They see their own opinions as just one of many, and naturally start to ask themselves, how do I know my opinion is right? That shift in perspective of going above it and seeing the full range of views shifts the conversation from arguing over individual opinions to figuring out objective criteria for determining which opinions are best. Behind the dot collector is a computer that is watching what all these people are thinking, correlates it with how they think, and communicates back to each of them based on that. Then it draws the data from the meetings to create a pointillist painting of what people are like and how they think. And it does all that guided by algorithms. Knowing what people are like helps to match them up better with their jobs. For example, a creative thinker who is unreliable might be matched up with someone who is reliable but not creative. Knowing what people are like also allows us to decide what responsibilities to give them and to weigh our decisions based on people's merits. We call it their believability. Here's an example of a vote that we took where the majority of people felt one way, but when we weighed people's views on the basis of their merits, the answer was completely different. This process allows us to make decisions not based on democracy and not based on autocracy, but based on algorithms that take people's believability into consideration. Notice that everybody could speak out on anything. Notice that we're constantly getting what everybody's thinking. And also we're learning about how they think, both because we learn what they see and how that might be different from what others see. And we also know that there's triangulation and feedback to other people. So take a look.
So if I get feedback from, say, a majority or even a significant minority of, say, students, right? Because I teach, and I can imagine, all of my undergraduates, 100 plus of them, doing the dot collector during my lecture. So if I get feedback from even a significant minority that says, you were tone deaf during this part of the lecture, like you weren't listening to what people were saying, you were like talking past us. You said that there is a probably like evolutionarily programmed part of our brain to say, and to, flee or fight in response to that. So tell me what you think could happen with the dot collector that doesn't make me just defensive and totally write off this, 30% of my students say I'm arrogant in a certain part of my lecture.
Well, first of all, people analytics people, you got to love this, right? I mean,
we're speaking to you. We're preaching to the preachers.
Here, okay, people analytics. Okay, now, curiosity, composure. In other words, okay, what is going on and why? And we can build that into the algorithms to determine that. When you start to enter your question, why? Okay, why does one have a different view than another? And you start to form your theories. We build these things into the tool for an algorithm that on the database you can say, oh, I see. That one has a certain thinking profile that's different from this one. Or, let me go into the database and find those things that those people who saw it that way have in common. So the analytical work can be done behind the scenes as you're seeing, okay, these people saw it. Or who are friends and do they work together? Do they see things? So you've got all of that data that you don't even have to analyze. Because the thing about analyzing data is that I found out from both the investment analysis and the people analysis is that if you observe how you are analyzing it, you can program the computer to do that for you.
And then invariably it's better than you idiosyncratically occasionally doing what you think you should do.
Well, yeah,
I think Danny Kahneman would say that.
You're handing, and you could do it in a triangulated way. So think about how much fun that is, people analytic people. So if you say, okay, now here's the data. How do we find out, use that data, realizing that's just one day. So one day, okay, it could be this reason, but do it 2 days, do it 3 days, see the pattern over time, okay? And then just intellectually, analytically having the fun of saying, okay, how would we test the why behind that? Right?
Like you could have a hypothesis like, oh, maybe when I said where I went to school for college, maybe my students heard that as condescending. That's a hypothesis. I can test that hypothesis the next day.
Over time.
Yeah.
So the collection of the data, when I say a dot collector, it's for the connecting of dots, right? In other words, a lot of people don't do a good job of connecting dots. It's like annual reviews.
So the dots are observations, but we don't connect them, right? We don't actually see the pattern. We don't deduce like what the cause is. We just experience like one dot after the other.
That's right. And I think like annual reviews, these are daily 360 reviews.
Right.
Because annual reviews are ridiculous.
They are ridiculous. I totally agree with you.
There's no, in the intervening period, like there's no adequate feedback. The thing that everybody wants most for their development and also to make sure the system's fair is ongoing feedback.
Right.
Okay, so it provides ongoing feedback on a daily basis. So whoever I'm working for, or these others, they got a 360 review. So at the end of the day, everybody looks back at their 360 review. Then they can discuss it, they can explore it, and it's on a daily basis, rather than something like an annual review, and you sit there and you remember and you don't remember, and it's all of these things, that's terrible. So that's why I did the dot collector.
Hey, Ray. Hey, Angela. That was an interesting conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Angela, do you think we should dot Ray? All right, let me pull up the dot collector here. I have 2 dots for you. The first one is I gave you a 9 for being open-minded. I think given the decades of your career and how strongly you believe in an idea meritocracy, it would be very easy for you to just be preaching about why that is the way we should all live. And I saw you playing with ideas, exploring. I thought that was really impressive, how much humility you bring to this topic.
So what dot did I get?
My prediction is that Ray wants a critical dot because experts experts want to learn how to improve.
That's exactly right. I mean, like, what could I have done better?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a 4 for practical.
Oh, tell me why.
Well, I thought there were a few places where I wanted more concreteness and more detail about the how, especially if I don't work in a culture like Bridgewater's where people are, constantly used to getting this kind of feedback. I wanted to know, okay, what do you say to yourself when, let's talk about right now, actually, I just gave you a 4.
See, that's just why it's so great, right? Because you brought it up and now we can talk about it. And I didn't know that. And great. Now I know that. Let's talk about it.
Good. Okay. So I just gave you a 4 on practicality. How do you react to that? You almost look like you enjoy it.
Well, I'm curious. I want to, in other words, you have a need that I'm not fulfilling. And so you've just told me in a sense that, you want to take a look at it. So explain more. How can I, what are your questions? What can I do?
Okay. So I guess the first thing I want to know is when you get that 4, it's obviously not the 10 you're aiming for. What are the thoughts and emotions that go through your head?
That is exactly what I wanted to know. I was wondering, you sounded enthusiastic, curious, and even excited, but
of course.
Wait. Where's the defensiveness? Where's the, hold on, practical? I just said we created PrinciplesYou and dot collector. Like, are you really not defensive even?
So it's so shocking that it just so you understand, it's so shocking that you would ask that question. Okay. You seem to be shocked at my reaction. Why? Let me ask you why.
I think the why for me, like if Adam says, Angela, I give you a 9 on openness or open-mindedness, I feel great. And then I'm smiling. And then I want to hear more about why Adam thinks I'm so great. If Adam thinks I'm a 4 on practical, I feel like I failed in a way. And I just mostly spend my energy wanting to change the 4 into a 9 just by Adam changing his mind.
Can I share why I think that's so illogical and tragic almost?
Yes, please.
Okay. First, you're assuming, are you assuming he's right or are you assuming he's wrong? You don't understand anything. It seems like you're so susceptible to his approval and without even understanding why, and so that people could walk up to you and they say, something's going wrong between me and Adam here. In other words, so we got to get in sync if we're going to have a relationship. So I need to understand that. And then also there might be the possibility that I could have done something better. And so how are you going to grow if you don't hear this?
It's all rational. I think one thing that might be helpful for me to be more excited when someone gives me negative feedback or, whatever, like constructive criticism, is that if I think about the future, not the past, if Adam says 4 and I'm just looking backward and I'm like, shit, 4, like, that's not very good. There's like,
but Angela,
but if I look forward and I think like, oh, 4, okay, great. And the next thing.
It's my 3 things. Let me just ask you, like, kind of again, do you think it's right? I mean, you haven't even heard what it is or why it is, and you're saying, "Oh, it's uncomfortable." Okay, so is that you don't even know what it is, and you don't want it?
Yeah, now, interestingly, I'm not even thinking. I think when you're like, "Do I think it's right?" and I'm like thinking, I was mostly feeling right then.
Okay. So I'm just trying to say it's like sugar.
So that's feedback, right?
It's like sugar. Okay, let's just decide what's good for us. Okay. And just try to say that accuracy is good for us.
Information is good for us.
Right. Accuracy.
Knowing more versus knowing less.
Right. And if we are like we are, it's great. It's okay. We are like we are. Now, how do we want to deal with that in the best possible way? And who can we work with who complements the way we work so that they can help us and we can help them? Like you really can help me and us be able to communicate this to people because you are living it. Okay, that's great. But we should intellectually, we have to agree is accuracy is good, and knowing that the impacts that you're having on other people or how to improve is progress.
Agreed. I guess that leads me to a follow-up question, which is, Ray, it's easy to see how the dot collector is useful for somebody who processes feedback the way you do. If somebody takes it more defensively, like Angela was describing her younger self, we were wondering, we've talked about this for years, actually. Is it helpful to shift and not rate the person, but rate the performance or the behavior?
I don't care what you call it, just as long as we get, okay, Ray, I mean, just feel good about saying it. I think you have to help people intellectually want it. It's like, do I want the coaching? If I was on a team and the coach said, you're not making the moves correctly or something, or whatever. You're not big enough to play that position. Okay, but you could be good at this other position. Okay, it's like, first, let's start there. Then what's experienced, because I've done this with literally thousands of people, because Bridgewater, okay, it's thousands of people. Then you take that and you say, okay, how do I go on that journey? Like Angela would be ready for the journey.
But I think the point that this actually also, I think that helps us make is that dot collector is great, PrinciplesYou is great, but their tools, they have to be embedded in a culture of trust and, growth, right? Because you can't drop these tools into a culture where people don't really actually have a fundamental level of trust with each other or have an orientation to improving themselves, right? And I think that's important.
Well, the trust comes from truthfulness. In other words, okay, I know you're
and caring,
essing.
Truthfulness and a motive that like
that's
I'm
right.
giving you
but
this
we
information.
have to start. But we have to start. Let's say if I was going to coach you in doing this, we would have to start, and I would say, okay, so just analytically, what's happening? You have an emotional self and you have an intellectual self, and right now they're at odds. Your emotional self is on
fire.
Okay. But your intellectual self says that's right.
Right.
And one of the great ways of success is when you align your subliminal emotional thoughts with your intellectual thoughts, because when they line up, then you're probably making a good decision. So the capacity to look at yourself, because a lot of things subliminally come up that are great and they could be terrible too. They have to be looked at. Inspiration, intuition. It all comes from the subliminal self and it comes up. Maybe it's right and maybe it's not right. And then you have your intellectual, okay? And if you can align these two and say, okay, they're in alignment, and if you align them with each other and then you align them with other people, you're probably right? But if they're out of alignment, like in your case, it sounds like they're out of alignment, or you would think, to me, I'm just trying to get them in alignment.
I think alignment is actually a secret to everything.
That was fun.
That was fun. Okay, I have some questions for you. And here's the first one. You ready?
Okay.
All right. Thinking about PrinciplesYou, one of our attendees asked, were there any decisive career shifts by people who took PrinciplesYou, the assessment?
Well, PrinciplesYou is, new. We're just now launching it and it's been well tested. So I don't have the track record of that, but I can say for having 20 years or so of all the different types of tests that there was big direction changes. I think you all probably know about that, when there was genuine personal discovery of what somebody's like and what the great fit is. So I think that's the discovery, right? What am I like and what is the great fit for me, not only in terms of the career, but also the people that I'm with. And so that's happened a lot.
It happened to me, by the way. I discovered a few years ago that I have many strengths, but one that I don't want to develop is becoming a better manager and leader. Note to self and shift as well. Okay, second question, does the delivery of radical transparency matter? And I know you think it does. So the question continues, how do you, Ray, recommend crafting an environment for optimal success of the delivery of feedback?
Well, I think you start off with, like in any good relationship, like, how do I want to be with each other? Should I tell you? Should you not tell me? How do we want to be with each other? And then also prepare them with the alignment issue that we were talking about. Your emotional self is going to be one way. Your intellectual self is going to be the other way. It's going to go this way. You will experience it. Look at yourself. What do you want to do? Almost everybody wants to do that, wants to get the right answer, wants to get a truth, wants to get in sync. They just have to guide themselves. Some can do it and some can't. Sometimes they find, no, I just can't bring myself. But you have to always, if there's a conflict in any way or any disagreement and something's not going wrong, pause and go above it and say, how are we going to be with each other? How should we be? And that makes that contract so you can go back into it. And then sometimes you have to remind people what you're doing, that what do you want? You say, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to tell you? Do you not want me to tell you? How should I handle that? And you can ask permission. You could also put it in context. I really enjoy this, and the other thing about you, but let's look at this thing.
I think that's good advice. I like the idea of asking for advice, because sometimes if someone said, hey, would you like some critical feedback right now? I think often I would say, Yeah, I can. And then some days I'm like, no, I don't want any critical feedback.
And that's okay.
And that's okay. I love that advice. Thank you. That's not intuitive. All right.
And also to communicate in the way that's comfortable to communicate. Like sometimes we find out maybe somebody doesn't want to do it fast on the spot, or maybe they don't want to do it right at that
moment.
What
about in front of other people?
Or maybe they want to type it into an email and make it a calm, thoughtful exchange. However they want to communicate is effective.
You know, it's an adage that we should praise publicly and blame privately. I wonder if you would agree with that or not.
No, I mean, I think you have to reach an agreement with the people, but it almost says that mistakes or weaknesses or are bad. Like you've got to hide them.
Right.
Okay?
Like, let's go off into this corner so I can give you some critical feedback.
I mean,
inadvertently sends a message that's, oh, it's a terrible thing.
If we can start to appreciate that accuracy is the important thing, I think the educational system makes a mess of these things. You know, you grow up and you're not allowed to make mistakes. You're a star if you don't make mistakes. I mean, the world doesn't work that way. Or what? You're not supposed to have any weaknesses? Let's recognize that everybody makes mistakes. Everybody has weaknesses, and that's okay. So let's not go hide that. Let's not go hide the transparency if you can get over it. Sometimes you need an adjustment into that. You know, there's a process that we go through. You know, we call it getting to the other side. Getting to the other side means you have that one state of mind, and then you take a little practice and so on, and you can get there so that we can talk about those things, ideally.
One of the attendees asked, for those interested in taking this test, and I think this must be her or him, can we find it online somewhere?
Yep, it's going to be all over the place. We're just about to launch it right now. I hope that you will take it. I hope that you'll pass it to people you have relationships and look at how your relationships are described, and provide us with lots of feedback, particularly you guys. Give us lots of feedback.
Especially the critical feedback.
Make it better. Especially critical.
Especially that.
What compliments don't do you any good?
Well, they can do a little bit of good, but we agree.